Welcome to our first legislative forum in a series of 3 being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County during the 2025 legislative session. My name is Joan Cook, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. I will be moderating today. Our timekeeper for today is Galen Wobenar, and also a League member. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. The League does take positions after considering a study of issues and acts to influence decision makers on those issues. Membership is open to people of all genders, age 16 and older. We invite you to join us. We can use your time, your talent, and your financial support for our ongoing operations. To learn more, speak to one of our members or reach out to us through our website or Facebook page. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. All Johnson County legislators were invited today to participate. Sadly, Senator Driscoll, Representative Hora, and Lawler did not respond to our invitations to participate. Today's forum focuses on issues related to education. I would like to introduce our legislators, the senators in order of seniority and then alphabetical. Zach Walls, District 43. Janice Weiner, District 45. Representatives in order of seniority and alphabetical, Dave Jacoby, District 86. Amy Nielsen, District 85. Eleanor Levin, District 89. And Adam Zabner, District 90. We will start the forum with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually, starting with Zach Walls, District 43.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you this morning. First of all, thank you very much to Joan and for the entire League team for putting on such a great event. It's great to be with you all. I know I missed the December event. My wife and I had our first child last year, baby Elijah, who hit 10 months old already yesterday. Don't totally understand how that's possible. But it's great to be with you all here this morning to share a quick update on the first few weeks of the session. I also do want to just observe how disappointing and frankly shameful it is that our Republican colleagues continue to avoid events like this, especially while they continue to talk publicly about the importance of representing all their constituents while completely ignoring their constituents in Johnson County. We deserve better. This year, I'm serving on the Health and Human Services Committee, the Commerce Committee, and the Technology Committee. And then for the first time, I'm serving on the Local Government and Workforce Committees. We have a couple of pieces of legislation that are already starting to move through all those areas. The governor, in her Condition to the State speech, talked about several pieces of legislation that I expect will move through those areas. A few of those include the implementation of Medicaid work requirements. I think the governor's indicated that she might be able to do this without legislation, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's some kind of legislative component. She's also talked about a kind of omnibus energy reform bill that'll likely go through the Commerce Committee, which oversees our investor-owned utilities, so Mid-American and Alliant, as well as all of our RECs and munis. We're definitely expecting to see some things happening in technology and potentially in local government. The governor announced in her speech the creation of an Iowa Doge. This is modeled off after Elon Musk and I guess he's not involved anymore, but Vivek Ramaswamy at the federal level trying to put some government efficiency into place at the state level. I, for one, think that this is actually a fantastic idea. In fact, I think it's such a good idea that we should definitely have it in our Constitution. And it's so important, we should probably elect somebody to lead our government auditing and efficiency efforts. I don't know if any of you are picking up what I'm putting down, but I think Auditor Sand's doing a fantastic job, and I think it's great that the governor has decided she finally wants to listen to what he has to recommend. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on that front. Finally, I'm sure we'll talk about some more of these pieces today, but I know that we had some great discussion for all the legislators who were here at the Iowa City Community School District Forum yesterday, talking about some of the various educational priorities, and I'm sure we'll have some discussion of those today. So looking forward to those, and with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Weiner.
Thank you, Senator Walz. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I echo what Senator Walz said about our missing colleagues. Every legislator should be accountable to the voters. We are your employees in Des Moines, and everyone should treat all of us as such, including those who have chosen not to be here at this forum and who have chosen to skip out on forums around the state. This year, I am serving also as the Senate Minority Leader, and I am on the Judiciary and Local Government Committees on local government as ranking member. It feels a little bit as if some of what we're doing right now in Des Moines is something of a sideshow compared to what we're watching in Washington. And so I'm really keeping my eye out for things that some of our Republican colleagues may decide they want to emulate that's happening in Washington right now. The local government, the head of local government does seem intent on continuing to curtail some of the powers of local government. He seems to think that they have essentially gone off, have just taken too many powers for themselves. So we will see where that goes. There are a couple of bills that were running last week through subcommittee, including one that would directly impact Johnson County, which is changing how supervisors are elected. We as Senate Democrats really would like to see work done that will improve the lives of Iowans, that will give Iowans a better deal, that will give them opportunity, allow them to earn a fair wage, afford housing, have a great future for their kids, and that's not what I'm seeing right now in Des Moines. When you look at things like the unemployment system, it's as we open the paper or our favorite app every day, it seems like almost daily we're seeing a plant closing or people being laid off. And we no longer have the unemployment infrastructure in the state to really serve Iowans' best interests. Both for folks who have been laid off and for seasonal workers, 16 weeks is not enough. Even Missouri has 20 weeks. A $7.25 minimum wage is not enough. Even Missouri voted this last election to raise the minimum wage. So if you look at us right now, we are an island in the middle of states that have higher minimum wages, better unemployment benefits, because they want to keep their workers here, which is what we should be wanting, to keep our young people here, keep our workers here, attract and retain people. So that's going to be our focus this session.
Representative Jacoby.
Thank you, and thank you for the forum. We are 2 weeks into the 2025 legislative session, and I do have to say, it's so good to be home. It's been an interesting start. I serve on Ways and Means. I'm the ranking member on Ways and Means. I'm on Natural Resources and Government Oversight. And for some reason, I'm also on the new committee, Higher Education. If you've been paying attention, this is a committee formed solely by Grassley and other Republicans to attack higher ed. It's not constructive. It's not showing us a path forward on how to improve our post-secondary schools. It's nothing but an attack. This week, we had a guest speaker. Her name is Neeta Arnold, N-E-E-T-A, Arnold. Google her. She's a 23-year-old young woman from Northeast United States, is going to Cornell, not the good Cornell here in Iowa, the Cornell up in New York. And she came back with her study about how badly in disarray our public universities are in. Now, I don't know if any of you took stats for social research. I took it. Well, I had to take it twice in college because we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. But and she used a denominator of 50 people, 50 hand-chosen people in the state of Iowa to develop policy on what we should do with our universities. It was simply appalling. And she kept referencing return on investment. And we asked a simple question. Does return on investment include the number of young people who are leaving the state of Iowa? Does return on investment also mean that our state investment in our public schools has gone down to around 30%? I asked the question, should the Board of Regents have oversight of our public universities if we're only supplying less than 50% of the operating costs? It makes the most sense that we're the big boss, or the regents are the big boss, or the governor is the big bosses, when we're not funding our public schools at a level that we should be. So this is the kind of format that we're starting with this year. So it's going to be a struggle if that is the kind of information that we're working from. As far as I'm concerned, our regent schools are fantastic. What we really need is a board of regents that are not appointed by the governor, that are elected by the people. And then they're responsible to the people and to the regions of the state. But again, on a positive note, it's good to be home. And I look forward to our discussions today.
Representative Levin.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for hosting to the league and for all the work that goes into putting on something like this and for making it available to those who aren't able to be with us. I have changed up some of my committees this year. I am now serving as the ranking member on the Government Oversight Committee. I also have continued to serve on the Veterans Affairs, Public Safety, Natural Resources, and International Relations committees. And I now have the opportunity to serve on both the Education's Budget and also on the Education Policy Committee. And that's something that has been really important to me in the past 2 years because we haven't really had a Johnson County voice on the Education Committee speaking up for our public schools, speaking up for our kids, our teachers, and our families. So that's something that I'm really focusing on in my time. The Education Policy Committee has certainly hit the ground running. I've already had, I think, personally 6 subcommittees on bills in that committee just this past week. And I have several more coming up next week. And I know I'm covering one from one of my colleagues next week because they have 2 that are scheduled at the same time. Not all of the ideas are terrible. We have bills in the Education Committee that update and improve the National Guard Service Scholarship Program. That was an idea that came to us last year. It was assigned to the wrong committee. The bill kind of didn't work the way they wanted it to. They retooled in the interim, and now we have a better version this year. So there are ideas that I'm excited about. There are ideas I'm less excited about. There are also ideas that are just complex, and I think it's worth taking time to get them right. One of the bills that I was on the subcommittee for would institute a citizenship test requirement for high school graduation. I don't necessarily think that's a terrible idea, but I think how we go about it is really going to be important. And so I'm pushing really hard on that one to make sure that if we pass it, we're passing what Iowans will benefit from, what's going to take care of ensuring that the districts have the ability to implement it in a way that's going to work for them, that's going to work for their students, and that's going to work for their teachers, and not in a way that the Department of Education is going to hand down this mandate onto the districts that's not going to work. So I personally am just really excited to be getting to focus more of my time on my personal area of expertise this session, and I'm looking forward to the questions today. Thank you so much.
Representative
Nielsen. Nielsen. It's okay.
Nielsen. It's right there.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot. I forget things.
And you're younger.
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you all for being here, and thank you to the League for hosting these forums for us every month while we're in session. I think it's important for us to get back here and talk to the people in our districts and for you to hear from us as well. This year, I am serving on the State Government Committee as the ranking member on Natural Resources. I'm on Appropriations for the first time, looking forward to learning that. And I still serve the Administrative Rules Review Committee, which is one of the most boring committees that has probably one of the more impactful jobs up there. So while I take a lot of naps during those meetings, if I'm on the phone, it is a very, very important meeting. And no, I don't really take naps. I was just kidding. One of the things that I find, well, there's a lot of them, but one of the things I find perplexing up in Des Moines is how much we heard about culture war issues during the campaign, and how we need to get away from that, and we need to worry about what's in Iowans' pocketbooks and things like that. And we had 95 subcommittees this week, and it was a shortened week, and not only one of them was about economic development. So you tell me who's worrying about what. We have had several really, really bad bills already presented to us, and I'm hoping that they get shut down quickly. But I don't understand why we only have had one subcommittee for economic development, when that's supposedly what the Republicans' biggest priority is for this year. Again, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities, I think is a Joe Biden quote. God, I miss him already. So yeah, we'll see what develops in the coming weeks, but so far it's kind of what we were all expecting.
Thank you. Representative Zabner.
Hi, thank you so much to everyone for being here. I'm Adam Zabner. I represent House District 90, which is the north and east side of Iowa City. We're sitting in it right now. I have most of downtown. I have a lot of thoughts on what's happening in the legislature, but I actually wanted to start with what happened last night. The Senate confirmed Pete Hegseth to run our nation's military on a 50-50 vote that was tie broken by Vice President Vance. And the key vote was our U.S. Senator, Joni Ernst. And Senator Ernst, I've never voted for her, but I have to say I've always had respect for her service in the military and for her commitment to fighting on the issue of sexual assault in the military, where she's really been a leader. And when Pete Hegseth was first announced, she came out pretty quickly with really legitimate concerns about his ability to run such a large organization and a crucial organization, and also the really credible accusations against him of sexual assault. And what happened was the MAGA mob turned on Senator Joni Ernst, and I have to say she conceded really easily. I think it took a couple days. And so all I wanted to say was, if all of our leaders concede that easily, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so I want to thank everyone for being here. You all are leaders. And by engaging in this process, by following what's happening at the Capitol, by asking questions to your legislators, by voting, you all are showing Iowa and the country and the whole world that our democracy is a lot stronger than being bullied by some MAGA mob people.
Thank you. At this time, we'll begin questions, starting with one of the leagues. We remind all participants that questions are limited to 1 minute. Please observe this time limit so legislators can address as many questions as possible. Legislators, please limit your responses to 2 minutes. All legislators are welcome to join in responding to each question. This is a league question. In Governor Reynolds' condition of the state address, she said, to pass meaningful property tax reform, we also need to be lean at the local level. State funding has not kept up with the cost of living increases. How will you try to ensure that public school reviews will be replaced by a predictable and reliable funding source?
Well, it's very interesting that the other team, who is not here today to answer this question, has been adamant about this since 2011. Since 2011, a number of pieces of legislation have been passed, and not a single one of them has worked worth a stuffing. They don't work because there's two things that they fail to focus on. When it comes to property taxes in Iowa, and I can say this because I'm not running for statewide public office, is we will never be able to do anything about property taxes in a positive way until we decouple agriculture and residential properties. Right now in the state of Iowa, since the late 70s, those two things are coupled. And quite frankly, it is the urban areas that are helping fund rural areas, which is okay. But we have to recognize that's where our city dollars and urban dollars and suburban dollars and towns over 5,000 are going to help keep the rural areas open. Until we decouple those two, there won't be any changes in property taxes. And secondly, we have to fund the unfunded mandates. On the books as of today, there's 141 unfunded mandates that go to county government, that go to city government, and go to our school districts and AEAs. The state tells the entities what to do, but the state does not fund it. So that too comes out of our property taxes. So I'll be interested that after the grand scheme bill of 2013, the bill from a couple years ago, if something will come forward that will work for the citizens of Iowa. I ask this question at most forums. Raise your hand if your property taxes have gone down in the last 10 years. And that's where we sit.
I was at a nonpartisan education policy conference back in December, and one of the things that was really interesting to me is that nationally, a big conversation is school funding formulas. And I'll admit, I was a little bit surprised because that's just hasn't been a topic of conversation in Iowa of changing our school funding formula. And I found out that's because ours is actually seen as one of the better school funding formulas in the nation. In fact, there are a lot of states that have been working on changing theirs over the past few years that look to Iowa's funding formula model as an exemplar. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? I'm not going to pretend it's perfect. But we have been lucky that ours has been updated more recently than a lot, but it was a long time ago, and they got it right in a lot of ways. So our school funding formula works. What doesn't work is the fact that the percentage increase every year is based on the whims of a body that has a flexible relationship to its public schools. And so I think it's really a great question. It's not something that I'll admit I'd really thought about, of how we take that good funding formula and couple it with a productive decision-making process for what the number is, right? What's the SSA increase every year? I know right now, this year, the only number that's been thrown out is 2%. Anybody think of anything that's gone up by more than 2% in the past year?
Eggs.
Butter is the one. I'm a baker, and I have not been baking because butter costs 4 times as much as it should, in my head at least. So I think that's a really great question, and certainly something that I'll be looking for opportunities on. It's not a conversation that I hear happening yet in Iowa, and is one that should be happening.
So I've served in the legislature 2 years now. This is my 3rd year. For the 2 years I've been there, Republicans have really had 2 top priorities. Number one, the voucher scheme, which next year will allow millionaires to send their kids to private school on the state's dime, and is way over budget. In the first 4 years is going to cost taxpayers $1 billion. Number 2 is cutting taxes for the richest Iowans. Those 2 priorities do not work with providing public education that is free and high quality to every Iowan across the state. And so that is the main difference in Des Moines, is we believe every kid should have a chance in a quality public education, and their 2 top priorities are giving tax cuts to the richest Iowans and sending their kids to private school on the taxpayers' dime.
So what both Representative Jacoby and Representative Zabner said are 100% true. If you look at the reforms that they've tried to implement over the past years, does anybody remember the backfill? that was going to make cities and counties and everybody whole for the amount that they were losing after the 2013 commercial property tax reform. The legislature, what the legislature giveth and the legislature taketh away, if you're Republican legislators right now. Property taxes are incredibly complicated. When I sat down with people in Iowa City and looked at their budget, they pointed out, and it's the same in literally every town and every county and every school district right now, the huge percentage of costs that are personnel related or simply mandatory services that they have to carry out for their citizens. And if they can't raise the levy, which most places do not want to do, they're going to have to find the money somewhere to get it done. So you push down in one area. If there's another place where you can increase it some, they'll increase it. I participated a month or two ago in an Eastern Iowa Board of Supervisors meeting that had supervisors from all over Eastern Iowa, mostly not particularly liberal. They were very angry at their state legislators because they said, look, we have certain tasks to carry out. We don't have the money coming in to do it. We can barely fix our roads, and yet you're sitting on these enormous surpluses in Des Moines. And as Representative Jacoby said, you're giving us all these unfunded mandates to carry out. So I don't have an answer to your question, but I do know that I don't think our colleagues have any idea right now if they're going to run property tax reform this year, what it's going to look like.
So yesterday afternoon, we were at a legislative forum hosted by the Greater Iowa City Partnership, and one of the topics of conversation was about insurance costs and home insurance in particular, which I don't know about all of you. I had like a 60% increase in my homeowner's insurance policy this last year, and the monthly cost of our mortgage between home insurance and property taxes went about 10%, almost 15% probably each month. And I mean, that's a real increase in our household budget that we're now obviously accounting for. And so I think when we're talking about kind of the general concern that a lot of Iowans have about the cost of living going up, whether that's property taxes or insurance costs, price of eggs, the price of butter, right? We're all trying to figure out how can we do more to get dollars back into your pockets so you can pay for the various bills and costs of life. I think one of the biggest challenges is, as both Representative Zabner, Jacoby, Senator Weiner, Representative Levin all discussed, is that over the last several years, Republicans in Des Moines have been really focused on cutting taxes for the richest Iowans. Just a few years ago, Republicans began the process of eliminating Iowa's progressive state income tax, which basically said that the more you earn, the more you pay. So, there are like 2,000 households in Iowa that have a take-home income of over $1 million a year. Each one of those households is going to get an average cost savings every year of over $60,000. And the average Iowa household is going to get an average take-home savings of about $500 to $600. And so you can just see where the priority is in terms of delivering relief to the wealthiest Iowans at the effective cost of taking away from middle class and working class Iowans. The reason this is really important is because, as Senator Weiner just discussed, when Republicans in Des Moines cut those taxes for the wealthiest Iowans, for the most profitable corporations, there was less money that state government has to backfill the local governments that are responsible for setting property tax rates. And as a result, the income tax cuts that Republicans passed in Des Moines has a direct effect on the property tax bill that you get at home. Right? We all can see that connection, and it's Republicans in Des Moines who are playing this shell game and trying to, run around saying, oh my gosh, these local governments are, these property taxes, when really they should be looking in the mirror. And so I think that this is very frustrating for all of us. We all had a lot of concerns about what Republicans did when those tax cuts went into law. And I think it's really telling that, at a time when, our unemployment rate is under 4%, the governor is proposing to dip into reserve funds to pay for the state budget. The whole point of a rainy day fund is that when the economy is in recession, you're able to tap that to pay for the various services that the state and local governments have to provide. And doing that, having to do that because of the fiscal policies that you've passed when unemployment is right around is under 4% is a really warning sign, a danger sign of where we're headed.
Thank you all. We will now accept questions from the audience. Please make a line at the microphone and keep your question to 1 minute. Galen will have a sign about when you're close to 1 minute. All legislators will have the opportunity to respond to each question, and legislators each have 2 minutes to respond. Out of respect for all present, please do not interrupt speakers.
Yeah, it is on. I'm Brady Shutt. I'm the president of the Iowa City Education Association. I'd like to thank the League for hosting this event once again, to our local legislators for being here, and for all of the folks who are here in the audience. My question, of course, we have priorities as an association and as a district. Fully funding preschool would be fantastic. Mental health services and funding that help SSA that's appropriate. My question is more related to how folks can be influential in the process. One of the things that we see, and you've mentioned it some with subcommittee meetings and concern about the states and the rules-making process, these folks here are obviously engaged. People who are watching are engaged. But how can people most effectively follow what's happening in Des Moines and then be influential in that process? Thank you.
Senator Walz.
So for what it's worth, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Brady, but the legislative website for the state is actually pretty good if you know how to use it. At some point, I would be happy to try and work with the League in organizing some kind of special forum or webinar or something. It's probably easier to do in a Zoom format so you can see how the website's being navigated. But to help folks learn how to navigate the legislative website, because once you actually know where to look and what links to click, I mean, I use it probably 50 times a day when we're in Des Moines to stay on top of various things. Because the number one way that you can try to stay on top of what's happening is through the website, where the notices get posted relatively promptly about subcommittees as they're assigned and scheduled. In the Senate, we use Zoom for the first round, the subcommittees where the public has the opportunity to express comment. I think in the House you have to be in person to speak, but at least in the Senate you can participate from right here in Johnson County. Obviously, contacting your legislators is an important opportunity. I'm not sure how many folks in this room live in the parts of Johnson County that are represented by our absent Republican colleagues here today, but certainly be sure to reach out to them and express your frustration that they weren't here at this forum, and then don't hesitate to contact them on pieces of legislation that come either before them in subcommittee or in the committees, policy committees that they serve on. The website does show you which legislators are on which committees. And and then again, just being involved in your associations. I mean, obviously ICEA is one, but the various associations that folks here belong to, whether it's the League or other civic associations, is a good way, typically speaking, to stay involved and abreast of what's happening in Des Moines, and then to be able to find the pieces of legislation that are relevant to you and reach out to the various legislators who are on those bills. But like I said, I'd be happy to work with somebody from either our shop or a legislator to help kind of walk through how the website works, because it's actually quite good.
Well, I'm always nervous answering a question from a government teacher. But one of the things, and we talked about this a little yesterday too, the subcommittee is the time when the public has the biggest opportunity for input, because it is subcommittee. If you're there in the House, you can make a comment on any bill that's being considered in subcommittee. What we've been doing as House Democrats, we've been pushing for a longer timeline for these subcommittees to be held. As mentioned before, we're already getting close to 100 subcommittees. For instance, on Monday at 12:30, we have a subcommittee on the gambling referendum, on the casino moratorium in Cedar Rapids. One of the things I pushed for is when we knew that we're going to have this bill to be addressed, as I said, could we give this at least 3 days? because they were pushing on Wednesday to have a subcommittee on Thursday. I said, well, that doesn't give people time to get here. So the agreement was that we will have a subcommittee on Monday, which gave us Thursday, Friday, the weekend, and Monday for people who are interested in that issue to come to Des Moines. That's on a timely basis. I think if it were up to House Democrats, whether you're in the majority or a minority, there's no reason that you can't give at least 48 hours notice for these subcommittees. Right now, we're having an internal fight just to keep it at 24, because many times they'll try to schedule a subcommittee within 16, 18 hours the next day. And even if you're good on the website, like everyone is here, or you're bad on the website like me, did I mention social stats twice that I had to take it? That the people that are trying to follow issues don't have enough time to follow that. So that's what we've been pushing.
I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, a friend of mine from high school, who started our conversation by sending me a message saying, so I screamed at my congressperson today. And I said, okay. In my experience, that's not super effective in convincing people to listen to your perspective. How did you get there? And they said, well, I just think being calm and collected is not getting us anywhere. And I said, okay, does being calm and collected mean you had contacted them previously and tried to make your points about your areas of disagreement in a way that you would maybe talk to someone if you thought you were going to work with them again the next day? Or does it mean you hadn't been saying anything, you had been holding your tongue, and then you exploded? And I didn't get a response for kind of a while. In terms of effective communication with legislators, I have watched I've watched colleagues of ours who were sort of uncommitted on an issue get pushed away from someone's perspective by an angry email that screams at them, whether it's all caps, whether it's swearing. I don't tell people not to write those emails. Write them. Just don't put a name in the to field, let them sit in the draft box, and then rewrite a version that suggests you might need to work with that person again the next day. When you are trying to convince someone, focus on, I understand that you care about our community just as much as I do. Here's some perspective I have that I think you might have that I hope you'll take in and attend to. Focus on holding folks accountable and telling them, you are the voice of Iowa on this subcommittee or on this committee. And as such, I expect you, or I hope that you will take seriously the Iowans like myself who are taking time to contact you. Right? I'm not saying don't write the angry email. And if you need to send it, you can send it to me. I'm always happy to get those and be the receptacle for the oh my God, this thing is just making me so angry, as long as it's not directed at me. But that's kind of the one side of it. The other is the league actually, and other organizations have done informational sessions in the past about utilizing the legislature's website. On the legislative website, there's actually quite a good video that you can watch if you go into the subscriptions page about navigating the legislative website. So if you don't have the opportunity to attend an event that's done, one time at the library or via Zoom, those videos exist. And so I would just recommend that you take a look at those.
I learned something every forum. All caps is bad.
I will say my favorite email ever received just said no, and it came from Dave.
Well, usually
All
it's
caps.
no. Yeah.
And it was all caps.
Yeah. I think the one thing that hasn't been said yet is we like having the personal stories. Everybody can go on One Click Advocate and find an issue, and we'll get 300 of the same email. And it's just not as moving as if you can send me, here's how all the cuts to AEAs is affecting my child, things like that. And I just want to say I'm so sorry there's no more Nielsen children for you to teach at Liberty. Yeah, I bet you do.
How about rulemaking? Amy, you're Representative Nielsen. That's another area we watch a lot, is the rulemaking process. A little different maybe, so if folks are thinking, okay, how do I follow that? It might be a little bit outside of the normal legislative flow. What would they maybe keep their eye on?
Yeah, I think keeping an eye on the agendas when they get put out. We meet monthly. It's usually the second Tuesday, I think, of the month, and our agendas will come out the week before. So you can see, what rules are going to come before the committee, and they'll also come before the committee like 3 times. Making sure that you're watching the agenda when things come in, and contacting me, or having the association contact me and the rest of the members of that committee. There's, like I said, it's one of the most boring committees. But and it's that way because we deal with a lot of information. So having an expert that can take the time to read them and point out where we should be looking is really, really helpful. So.
Yeah, and I just add that the rulemaking is probably becoming more important since the boards and commissions bill last year, and some other states that have them reviewing every single rule supposedly on a 5-year cadence now, and then we need people to keep an eye out, because there will be standards, for example, that move through the process where you have a group of experts who have put together text or given their opinion, say on science education, is one of the most recent examples. And then when the board of Ed puts out the text to review, it has very little relationship to what the experts had put together. So we need your eyes and ears also to help hold everyone accountable.
And one of the big things also that we watch for in that committee is when departments overstep their authority and try to create a rule that should be done in legislation.
Next question.
Good morning, Ruthina Malone. I currently serve as the president on the Iowa City School Board. Thank you to the League for hosting our forum, and thank you to you all for attending, as well as committing or attending ICCSD's monthly forums that we are holding as well. My question is tied to your missing colleagues this morning. In what ways are you trying to reach across the aisle, either individually or as a Johnson County body, to ensure that when their schedules don't permit them to attend these type of things, that they are hearing what you're hearing from individuals here, either individually or as a Johnson County body representing us?
Well, they would probably say they're tired of hearing from me, but that doesn't deter me. One issue that I am trying to work with a couple of them on that I think would be really valuable for our community is the idea of allowing Johnson County to look at a regional transit authority. So in the state code, for whatever reason, only counties with over 175,000 people are allowed to set up regional transit authorities. That would mean more bus lines that connect the different cities in our community and potentially some parts of the county. And so I'm looking at lowering that line. I'm really hoping that some of them will join me in doing that. I will also say, I know Senator Walz alluded to this earlier, but one thing they're engaged in, and they're obviously not here to hear your feedback about today, is this effort to undermine the authority of Johnson County voters to choose how we elect our supervisors. So every county in the state of Iowa has a choice. The voters can choose if they want to have at-large districts where supervisors are elected countywide, or if they want to be split up into districts like we are for the legislature. Senator Driscoll does not like the decision that Johnson County voters have made, and thinks that she and her Republican colleagues know better, specifically for Johnson County. I honestly don't have a strong opinion on whether we should have districts or be at large, but I think it's really disrespectful to the people of Johnson County to say that only we wouldn't be able to make this choice for ourselves. We've seen other counties like Lynn change through referenda how they do their process. And so I see this as an assault on democracy that I think has already made it out of committee in the Senate. And it's really shameful that they claim to be listening to Johnson County voters, but they don't actually show up to listen to Johnson County voters.
Maybe they hired someone from Cornell in the northeastern United States, and they polled 2 people. Ruthina, thank you so much for being on the school board. Talk about a tough job. And I remember at my senior year of high school, they said, will you run for senior class president? I said, yeah, I will. Dave, will you run for city council? Yeah, I will. Will you run for state government? Sure. Will you run for school board? Hell no. You know, you mess with people's taxes, it's one thing. You mess with their kids, holy cow, they do know where you live. But thank you ever so much, and everyone that serves on the school board. In answer to your question, I've already reached out to a number of Republican cohorts, to John Wills up in Northwest Iowa and Dickinson County, to a couple of our members in Powesheet County and Iowa County, and in Calhoun County and Sac County, saying, I know it's very hard for you and your members to drive 20 minutes to be here. I will drive 4 hours. I will drive 6 hours to attend and participate in your forum. So those offers were made just this week, saying, you know, and one of the gentlemen did say, well, maybe a little balance might be good at our forum.
Might have to put your mouth
Yeah, of course, that was the gentleman from Dickinson County, which is 6 hours away, but I hope he takes me up on that offer.
Ruthina, just, when I was first elected, I represented 3 counties. I lived in Coralville, but I also represented all of Cedar County and several precincts in Muscatine County. And at a certain point, you just have to do the job. And we can't force Dawn Driscoll and Representative Lawler and Representative Hora to be here. They have to choose to come. And the fact that they are choosing not to be here when the league has done a very good job of kind of providing advance notice and helping people, give the time to be here, there's really no excuse, bluntly. That being said, the vast majority of the legislation that will pass the General Assembly this year will be bipartisan and will pass, probably 99-0 or 1 out of the House and close to 50-0 in the Senate. The first subcommittee that I was on this year was a pretty technical bill dealing with rural emergency services, rural EMS, which has been a topic that I've worked on off and on since I represented Cedar and Muscatine County. And one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about that issue is that I actually showed up in Cedar and Muscatine County to listen to people there and hear their concerns. Jeff Kaufman and I don't agree on a lot, but he was on the Cedar County Board of Supervisors at the time that I was representing, and I think Jeff Kaufman would tell you that every single year I represented Cedar County, I showed up to the supervisors meeting to listen to their local stakeholders and hear what was on the agenda. And at a certain point, the decision by Dawn Driscoll and Judd and Heather not to be here is them telling you all a very clear message, which is that they don't care about what you have to say, right? And that's, again, it goes back to the point that Representative Zabner just made about, again, I kind of agree. I don't have particularly strong feelings about whether we have districts or at-large representation in Johnson County, but the idea that you would undermine the self-determination of Johnson County voters to make that decision for ourselves is something that I have an enormous problem with. And when we were in committee, I asked Senator Driscoll, there had been a version of this bill that had bipartisan support, where the population limit was set at 60,000 rather than the new bill, which is 125,000. See if she could explain the difference to me of what practically is the difference between 125,000 and 60,000. And she just kept saying, well, this is the deal that we made with the House. So, yeah, I understand why we're here, but you're not explaining to me what the actual difference is. And again, they're just more focused on reaching a deal and passing, a bill that affects us rather than actually having a real understanding of the problem and working with. I don't know about you guys. I wasn't invited to make any deal on this bill. They're purely, right, this is purely a Republican thing. So it's really frustrating.
So I talk to Republican colleagues every day, both in committee and out of committee, sort of small talk in the halls, discussing specific bills, such as one for which a subcommittee was actually canceled last Thursday for local government, which would turn local elections partisan, in which I told the chair, at the very beginning of the session, asked him why he was running it, because it didn't seem to me that was a great idea, given the mix that you have locally. Everybody needs to be able to step up for their community without having an RRD after their name. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but we've been talking about it. With respect to this county supervisor bill, it is sadly blatantly, and not surprisingly, but blatantly political, because but the fascinating thing about it is it's not going to do what they want it to do in most counties. So we'll see where it goes, but should it pass, they will end up with, say, for example, more Democrats and less rural representation in Scott County, for example. So
I know I'm not the only one, but I get out of Johnson County. And when I'm when I'm at a trivia contest in Washington where Heather Hora is on her team beat mine, I'm just going to say it. I went over and had a conversation with her. I let them know that I'm there, and we have convivial conversations. And when we're back in Des Moines, I say, hey, I hope to see you at the legislative forums this weekend. I know we've all received the invitations because I can see the list of people who received it. And I make sure that, it's, again, as Senator Wall said, it's not my job to get them here, but I do what I can to just show, like, hey, I come to you. I listen to your community. Are you coming to listen? And then I don't represent them technically, but I also value their input and their perspective and their experiences. I learned a lot about nursing care in Washington County at that event because of the table I ended up sitting next to. And that's one of the things that I try to do.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm John Spear, Chief Administrator at Grantwood AEA. So I guess I probably represent birth to grade 12 educators in a 7-county region. First, I'd like to thank the League for organizing and holding the event, and certainly thank our legislators giving us some of your valuable time. You don't have enough of it back home during the session. My question is more global, and we began to touch on it. So the rural estimate, the REC, the committee or conference that estimates income for the state of Iowa, is projecting negative general fund growth, so fewer state dollars year over year. So in an era of what looks to be declining funds, how could and should we support birth to 12 or birth to 16 in an arena where there are fewer dollars to spread around the state?
I'd suggest that we not fully fund vouchers, among other things.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the quote that Representative Nielsen brought up. Show me your budget and you show me your priorities. If our priority is fully and holistically educating every single Iowan, then that's where we start when we're making our budget. We figure out what funds are required for that, and that's the top number. And then we allocate the available funds beyond that. And if that's, one of our top 3 priorities, then okay, we start with those 3 numbers, and then we allocate the remaining funds. And it's just not the way that is done.
Yeah, my comment was a little bit flippant, but I'd add that it's not responsible budgeting on the part of our Republican colleagues, because the voucher bill is an unlimited, uncapped amount. We never know how much it's going to be, and that's truly not a responsible way to budget. If we want to budget responsibly, we'll also go back to the pre-COVID policy of having, and it may sound wonky, but it's important, joint budget subcommittees with the House and the Senate, so that during the entire legislative session, so that we have an idea, so that we can talk to agency heads and get a sense of what's needed, and where the budget stands and where the money could or should go before budget decisions are being made, rather than having the budget numbers drop in the last couple of days of the session and be inserted into already existing bills.
Yeah, I want to go back to something Senator Walls was talking about earlier, which is that we're in pretty decent economic times in terms of unemployment, and we're already seeing this trend. That's very concerning to me. Something Republicans are fond of saying at the Capitol is that you shouldn't use one-time money for ongoing expenditures. And actually, I think they're generally right about that, right? We saw a lot of states, for example, use federal ARPA money to fund these long-term programs, and now they're trying to figure out how to fund those when the federal money dries up. But Republicans are now proposing using, the taxpayer relief fund to fund ongoing crucial expenditures of state government. And, there's an endpoint to that, and you can see a time in the future where, God forbid, unemployment isn't so rosy in the state of Iowa, or, the amount of income being taken in by people starts to go down, and you could see a real pinch in the state budget. And again, it's the result of having the top two priorities of the majority party be unlimited money for vouchers and tax cuts for the richest Iowans at the expense of the middle and working class.
John, appreciate the question, and I just want to point out something that went a little kind of unstated in your question, which is we were told that the tax cuts would pay for themselves, and now revenues are declining, which raises the question: what else are Republicans telling us that is flatly false? Good question, I think, right?
Prices will be down on day one.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? I mean, there's a lot of. We were told that if you go to a flat income tax, that you would attract more taxpayers and you'd broaden the tax base. That was all wrong. It was all wrong, right? And so now, just again, declining revenues, it's a choice. That is a choice that Republican policymakers made in Des Moines. And as a result, there are going to be, fewer dollars to go around. And as a result, Republicans who are writing these budgets are going to have to basically pick and choose winners and losers. And it will be very interesting to see who they decide to fund and who they decide not to fund. I will tell you, just on a personal level, I've got a much a greater appreciation for AEAs. When my wife and I had our son Eli last year, we started going to the PEDS appointments and started seeing the AEA, kind of posters and what have you that are in there. And I think I was starting to realize, when you say birth to 12, I mean, that's a true, observation. And so I just want to express my gratitude to you and the staff that you lead, because I know that you've all been through a hell of a lot over the last 12 months. John and his team, for those of you who don't work particularly closely with AEAs, have the not enviable task of continuing to deliver really important services to our young people while also going through the swirl of whatever you want to call the last 12 months of Republicans basically taking a grenade, pulling the pin out and rolling it into all the AEAs across the state. So I just want to express my gratitude to you, and I think it says a lot to you and your leadership that even when you have 156 days left before your retirement, you're taking your time on a Saturday to be here with us. So thank you very much.
Hi, I always go after the AEA guy. It's a hard act to follow. My name is Missy Forbes, and I am the Executive Director at 4Cs. Thank you to the League for the invitation to show up here on a Saturday, and thanks to you all for coming here on a Saturday. As you know, 4Cs represents the child care workforce, and you all know me pretty well, and so I'll say that it's frustrating to hear that the early care isn't included with our K through 12 education when we talk about it. And following the gentleman from the AEA talking about birth to grade 12 care, I'm wondering if you all are willing to prioritize early care, that birth to 5 years, in the same way that we talk about and fund K through 12 education. I know that there is talk, and there will be talk about universal pre-K and 4-year-old preschool, which I completely embrace and am excited about. But looking at the business model of early care, that has a toppling effect for those families who receive care and utilize care in that birth to 3-year range. And so we're looking at if all 4-year-olds are able to access preschool at our school districts, what does that do to, Zach, and increasing prices for your 10-month-old, et cetera, et cetera. And so anyway, I think that I tried to word my statement as a question. I don't know if that got across, but essentially, will you all be prioritizing early care, that 0 to 3 and 4-year care, 5-year care, in the same way that we do K through 12 education?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, I'd say House Democrats have prioritized that for a few years now. If you look at our People Over Politics agenda that we brought out right before right before the 24 campaign season, that was one of the platforms that we had is making sure that childcare is accessible and affordable to all Iowans. Yes, of course, we prioritize that. We prioritize a lot of things that the Republicans don't.
And it's no longer anecdotal. I mean, I don't have to tell you this, Missy. It's no longer, well, I look at the kids in my family and I can see that, 0 to 3 has a big impact on the rest of their lives. We have years and decades of data now that demonstrates the importance of 0 to 3. And so if we don't prioritize it, it's ignoring those decades of research. So I don't know how you go about doing that without belying a mistrust of expertise.
I mean, the short answer is yes. And we can do it in different ways. It's going to depend on our Republican colleagues. One is working on universal preschool for 4-year-olds at the same time as you partner, as we were discussing before this, with local child care centers, and so that they are part of that equation. Another way we've seen in Johnson County and in a couple of other efforts around the state, by creating funds so that we can professionalize and increase the salaries of child care workers so that they can actually they can afford to do that work, because we don't need the churn through the system. And there are many other options as well. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, again, Missy, I've developed a great, much more personal understanding of how the child care system works. I mean, literally, we got back from our 12-week appointment, and we were like, all right, so now we got to start looking for child care slots, And, I mean, we feel lucky to have found a child care facility that costs less than our mortgage, So for us, $1,300 a month that works in our budget. It's tight. It's not, an easy expense. But also, I mean, I have friends who are on the East Coast who are paying $4,000 plus a month, and I'm just sometimes makes my head spin a little bit. But to the point is, I mean, even in our 6 months or so that Eli's been in daycare, I mean, we've had turnover in the staff there, and we understand. I mean, the fundamental problem or the fundamental challenge, I think, for childcare is you have people who are kind of by definition earlier in their careers, lower in their earning potential, trying to pay for full care service with very strict requirements from the state in terms of staff ratios, that create some real challenges in terms of making everything pencil out. And so the obvious solution, I think, is that we need greater state money to help smooth that out, because when you're looking at the costs to young families, and we know that Iowa has an aging population, we're trying to we need more Iowans, younger Iowans, and better paid Iowans, and oftentimes that includes the staff who are in these facilities. So again, all of our colleagues up here expressing strong support, I think, for our workers. We're all greatly appreciative for everybody who chooses to take care of our little guys and girls, and I just want to say thanks for being a great advocate for them. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there are things that you see that are coming forward in terms of things that you think could be a good solution. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, obviously the Republican majority will make the final decision on a lot of this stuff, but we're always happy to try and plant some seeds.
I just want to say thank you for everything you do for childcare. I'm hesitant to say anything because when I get home, my wife will say, "You idiot, you should know more about this other than just raising our kids." But I'm asking for your help, because if you notice the governor's budget and what she's proposing to do with Early Childhood Iowa is basically eliminate it and then start something over. So what we're looking at now is a system that's been in place for child care improvement, and we don't know what it's going to look like July 1st. Is that a fair assumption? Does that sound right from what you're saying? Because I was looking over that budget. I go, well, there is no new money. There's no new good answers. We're just zeroing out one column and hoping by July 1st we come up with something else.
She's moving money around. I mean, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
So I did read it right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. I am also part of the Iowa Child Care Coalition, and we do have a day on the Hill on February 12th. So I invite all of you, and I'll send you emails too with a reminder, but hope to see you there and we can talk more. There are a couple of bills in subcommittee that are concerning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Joy Smith. I'm an Iowa City and a retired AEA employee. My question, Eleanor, you spoke about our admirable funding formula for public schools. And we've talked about these education issues this morning with a lot of focus on budgets and the cost of the vouchers and all of that. My question is, how do we change the narrative? Because I think we have a lot of evidence that this isn't about parent choice. This isn't about dollars and cents. This is about a change of values, I think, in the governor's office and among the Republicans in the legislature about whether we really believe that all children deserve an equitable education and whether we're really interested in our state in paying for that. And I think there's evidence across the country and other states that have done vouchers to support that. So to the question, how do we change the narrative? So we're really talking about the issue.
Wish I would have had that answer before November 5th. It is a struggle. It is a struggle because sometimes not everyone at the same level wants to listen to facts and figures. And when you use the word values, some people accept that word as common, but it's not always common between individuals, families, schools, churches. I struggle with the narrative because I know in my heart what I want to see in Iowa. Every student has opportunity. I also know in my heart that they don't right now. So for me, I'm looking to you for some of those answers and suggestions too.
This is sort of how I think about it, and it's just a basic difference in priorities. But I remember when I first joined the legislature, this bill passed, I think, my second week, and I remember hearing the governor talk about it in her condition of the state, and she essentially said, how can we leave kids in so-called failing public schools when they could have a choice to go to a different school? And the question that kept burning in my mind was, how can you have been the governor of a state for 4 years and it's acceptable to you that there's failing public schools? And so that's just the basic difference in priority. I mean, you can spend $1 billion and you can take 80% kids that were already in private school and give their family, $8,000 a year. And what we've seen is that schools are raising their tuition 40 and 50% so that many of the kids in public school don't actually have a choice to go to the private school. And of course they don't if they have any kind of disability or if they're an English language learner or if they're not the right religion for the private school. But the fundamental question is it acceptable to you to look at the state of which you're governor, see what you think of as failing public schools, and do nothing about that?
Joy, it's a great question. And I think you're absolutely right. It is about a change in values, and it's a change in the story that is being told about our public schools. And I think a big part of the changing story that a lot of Republican legislators have told themselves is that, our schools have become woke, and they're all kind of radically indoctrinating kids by talking about, diversity and equity and inclusion. And they've really seen this has become a political strategy, right? And I think this was true before the COVID, and I think it's become even more true since the pandemic. And this is part of a national thing too. I mean, this has become a national movement by the right wing in America to politicize and attack and undermine public education, whether it's at the higher education level and what's happening now with the attacks on our Regents institutions or attacking K-12. And so, in terms of how we change the narrative, I do think a lot of it does have to be driven at a national level. And, I think to some extent there's probably some hard reflecting that has to be done about how do we win back public support for public education? How do we tell that story? as thinking about public schools as a way of bringing our country together. Iowa has been, frankly, a national leader in school choice for decades. I mean, we had one of the most expansive open enrollment programs in the country. The idea that families didn't have choice in Iowa was wrong. And I think another piece of the story here, too, is that a lot of the private schools have basically taken the voucher money and run. I mean, they've increased tuition by an amount that is interestingly close to the value of the voucher. And, I'm not a math teacher, but I don't think you need to be one to figure that out. And so I think part of it is going to be some of the natural backlash, because there are, frankly, a lot of communities across the state where they don't have a private school option, or if they do, it's a very, very small school with a very small number of slots, or like a very specific set of beliefs that the parents might not be okay with, which is part of why for a very long time a lot of rural Republican legislators opposed vouchers. I still remember listening to Representative Bobby Kaufman say, "Read my lips, I'll never vote for vouchers," before he voted for vouchers. So And I don't necessarily mean that just to go after Bobby, but there has been a big shift among especially rural Republican legislators who for a very long time, frankly, held the line on this topic before the governor went after them full force with her primary campaigns.
Well, and Betsy DeVos and a lot of other national Republicans spent a lot of money to make that happen.
Yep, that's right.
I mean, it's a really good question. And it entails, as some of us have been doing, really going out around the state to listen to folks who are in smaller communities with smaller school districts that have been really adversely impacted because they don't have a private school anywhere near them. They depend on their privates. They depend on their public school. It's the Friday night lights, and the Friday night lights going out for some of these communities. I think that we may have a chance at essentially a second bite at the apple if they decide to do what they did last year and come after public libraries. Communities love their libraries. They too are centers of the community. They know that without the libraries, just as with their schools, their communities would die. Anybody who's been out and around this state knows how much pride every community takes in their library, and I would urge anyone who has a chance, and I have to find the URL for it, but Kossuth County, the double large county up in northwest Iowa, almost had their libraries defunded last spring because of a decision from the Board of Supervisors there. When the people found out, they rebelled. There was a 90-minute long public input session that's available on YouTube somewhere, which is just remarkable. People from all over that county coming up and saying, I wasn't planning to speak, but here are the 5 things that this library does for us. So at the end, the Board of Supervisors said, well, because of property tax reform, we thought we really had to put all our money to roads. We can't do anything now, but after the new fiscal year starts July 1st, we'll look at it again, and they did, and they refunded the Kossuth County libraries.
I just want to I just want to say thank you for that. I raised this question because I think at forums like this, we need to talk about this issue too, and not just the budget and the choice. And thank you.
All right, my name is Jennifer Patel, and I was on the board commission that looked at the city charter. And one of the things that I learned doing that is the best way to do, like supervisors and cities, is to have a hybrid way of electing the elected officials, because then you have where some of them are elected at large and some of them are elected by district. So that way you have the best of both systems. And my question is, did the Republicans ever consider doing a hybrid system, which I found to be the best?
So, Jennifer, are you talking about a hybrid system at the state level, or are you talking about for locals?
For every level.
So for counties, that option exists. There's option 1, 2, and 3 in law. One is at large, 2 is hybrid, and 3 is districts only. And at least in the draft law that's moving forward right now, they would force certain size counties into only districts. But for counties, the possibility exists.
In my opinion, the best option is the one that is chosen by the locals. And so Jennifer, while I appreciate so much the work you did in serving on that commission, like that's a time decision that you made to serve our community, and I want to thank you for that. I would be concerned about the state telling all the counties what the best option is, regardless of how much research they put into that option.
I'm all for, say, abolishing the Iowa Senate, but but if we're going to do that, we should go through a constitutional amendment process on the Iowa ballot. It shouldn't be chosen by President Biden or President Trump. And this is the same thing Republican leaders in Des Moines are doing. They're trying to say, we don't like what Johnson County is doing, so we're going to make the decision for the voters there.
I hate to break it to you, Representative Zabner, but the only state-level unicameral is the Nebraska Senate. So just careful what you wish for. In terms of the question, Jennifer, about whether or not Republicans considered it, it's hard for us to know because they don't include us in their kind of reflections or negotiations. And look, unfortunately for the entire as hard as it is for me to believe, now 7th session that I've got coming up here, 6 years I've served so far, that I've been in, it has been a very partisan-driven approach to policymaking. And you can, when you talk to some of the folks who have served back in the 80s or even the early 90s, it was a very different process. The way that it works now, basically, before committees, the Democrats and Republicans each go to their corner and they have a small meeting about what the agenda is and kind of the bills that are going to be discussed. And those are closed door conversations. They don't happen in public. When Senator Driscoll says in committee that they've got an agreement with the House, what they really mean is that Senate Republicans negotiated with House Republicans, not that the Senate negotiated with the House, right? And so that level of partisanship is just really baked into pretty much everything that they do at this point. So unfortunately, it's really hard for us to have a lot of visibility into negotiations specific to this bill because frankly, Republicans don't feel like they need to include Democrats, which is ironic given that the 3 counties that they're specifically targeting with this are all very Democratic counties, but that's neither here nor there.
That's kind of here. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Roman. I live in North Liberty. I work for Grantwood AEA, serving children and families, birth to 3, with developmental delays and disabilities. These questions are all mine personally, but that's the context. Zach, thank you for your words. I know we all really appreciate the credit. During the condition of the state address, Governor Reynolds spoke to creating this new fund to expand childcare options in the state for families, but it uses all existing funds. And one of those is $3.6 million in the state's Shared Visions grant. That money typically goes to help with preschool and wraparound care for at-risk populations. So we're talking about our at-risk little teeny tiny people. That application has been, the committee is done with it. It has been ready to go. It's usually due by this time of year. And on the state website, the link to that application currently says delayed. So for programs who have been utilizing either the federal wraparound funds, the Shared Visions grant, who are waiting to see when they can apply for that grant for the services that they are already providing and the people that they need to pay for the upcoming fiscal year. This is probably a rhetorical question, but when can they plan to have a deadline for the application of those funds? And is there risk that those programs may not be able to access the funds that they have been accessing for years or decades. Some of those programs are housed right here in Johnson County. Some of those programs are housed in Washington County, which is where I primarily work. So I would also encourage our other representatives to come and listen. But those have been brought to me by a couple providers, and I don't know if any of you have the answers to that, but that is a burning question for the people that are already providing those services and counting on those funds.
Thank you for the question, Jessica. I don't have an answer, but I will pass that on immediately to our staff and try and figure out what's going on.
Thank you.
Good morning. Karen Franklin. I have no particular affiliation. My question goes probably more specifically to Representative Levin, in that you mentioned a citizenship requirement for graduation from high school. I have some concerns about that. I'm wondering how it will impact our kids that may not have citizenship now, may be on their way, but as we know, it takes a very long time. And if birthright citizenship is changed, as someone wants to do, what would be the consequence of this requirement?
It's a great question and kind of mirrors some of the questions I asked in the subcommittee. So the actual requirement is that it would be basically the immigration citizenship test would be converted to a multiple choice format and administered to all students as a graduation requirement. The current bill as it stands is very, very light on the details with the organization that brought the bill to the legislature's intent is that districts have some flexibility in how that is administered. The reality is that the bill gives the Department of Education rulemaking authority to determine how it's administered, which is the source of most of my concern. So some of the conversations have been around who is incurring the expense for converting that oral test that's given at citizenship as when our fellow Americans become citizens into a multiple choice exam. Is it available? In what formats is it available? Can students, the bill does establish that students could retake the test as many times as needed, but it does not establish anything about when they might be allowed to begin taking it, like whether they can take it, say we have a 9th grade civics class, can they take the test in 9th grade when it's fresh in their minds, or do they have to wait? That's not clear, so that right now is not established by the bill. There's a few other things. So yeah, getting some of those questions answered is top of mind for me.
So it's not a requirement for citizenship per se, but that our students as they graduate have the same knowledge about our country, our government, as do people who are applying for citizenship?
Yes. The intent of the bill is to establish that students graduating from high school in Iowa demonstrate the same level of knowledge about our history and our civic systems as those applying for citizenship and achieving it in Iowa.
Maybe we could do that at the federal level for everybody who is running for office.
Or the state level.
State level, too.
Yeah.
There's a possibility. I already have that amendment drafted.
I mean, look, I don't necessarily dislike the idea of testing the civic knowledge of our high school students. I think that the current situation in the country is a good indicator that, civics education has maybe never been more important. But the idea that you're going to make it a requirement for graduation, you're talking about this is not a test that's used to really gauge or evaluate, right, high school civics education, right? I think that also Representative Levin illustrated the fact that there are a lot of questions about the timing and all of these things. I think it could probably, and I don't want to, Mr. Shudd, speak for you, I think we could probably figure out a way to make it work if it becomes law. But I would certainly be interested to see the scores of the current members of the Iowa legislature and have those published publicly. Absolutely.
I'll also just say, we are losing rural schools across the state ICCSD had to close Hills last year, and the conversation at the legislature is about random new tests for high school seniors and requiring first graders to watch pseudoscientific propaganda that's anti-abortion. And it's just completely out of whack with what Iowans are experiencing. Most Iowans want a school that is close to them and high quality and has small class sizes and can give their kids a chance in life.
You know, what Representative Zabner is referring to is the so-called Baby Olivia bill, which has resurfaced this year and is another version of the indoctrination that many of our colleagues decry, but really has not existed until this sort of thing came forward.
Thank you for being here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this event, and thank you for allowing me to ask a question. I am a member of the city management profession for local government, and my job is not about politics. My job is to make sure that the city that I have been hired to serve for the elected officials of that city, to make sure that it's functioning effectively. I appreciate you, Representative Jacoby, for mentioning unfunded mandates, because that is something that is extremely frustrating to me. I am also frustrated with the lack of competitive. I feel like I am in a fish with big sea, I feel like I'm in a sea with big fish when it comes to applying for grants for infrastructure projects, grants to fix our water pipes, and grants for all that stuff. The competitive bidding environment, the shaft is given to smaller rural-based municipalities. I like the fact that President Biden did do the grant funding that he did, but it was distributed through current existing funding mechanisms, which leads to a major disparity. So the big cities will get that money get that money first, while the little cities have to compete for it, and most of us can't afford grant writers and that sort of thing. So, and then you've got the unfunded mandates mixed with you tying my hands behind my back when I make recommendations to council members on how we should tax people. So you're kind of sandwiching us, and then we get yelled at because we can't make up our mind, because I can't get money, but I have to fund their water infrastructure. I have to give them proper drinking water and all the stuff you expect of us. So I guess my question is, instead of blaming the other party, what solutions do you have to help me? Because I can't effectively help your citizens if you're tying my hands behind my back but expecting me to do things at the same time. Thank you.
What was your name and what city do you work in?
I'm visiting here because I missed the local one in Lynn County, but I work for Fairfax. So Fairfax is not involved in this as much as this is just my generalized experience. I'm new there, but I just wanted to ask because it seems to be the same problem across the country.
What was your name?
Dustin Stambosser.
Where were you before you were in Fairfax?
Ellsworth, Kansas.
Ellsworth, Kansas. Well, how long have you been in Iowa?
I'm new. Like I said, I'm new, but I did want to express it because it seems like the same challenges are here as it is across the country.
Yeah. Well, it would be great if the people who voted for the laws that you're talking about were here to hear the things that you just expressed concern about.
Yeah,
and I understand your point about not wanting to make it partisan, but I want you to understand this is partisan.
Fair enough.
You have a Republican Party in this state that has looked at local governments and said, we don't trust you, we don't particularly like how you're governing, and so we're going to give you a list of unfunded mandates, and then we're going to take away your ability to do the things that we tell you to do. That's what's happening. And I'm not coming at you, but this is a thing that Dawn, Judd, and Heather should hear. And they are choosing not to by skipping forums like this one. And it's appalling and shameful because this is an appropriate forum to have this conversation. Joy appreciated the conversation about stepping back and having a big picture conversation. This is another one of those big picture conversations because, again, this is not about you, Dustin.
And I'm not attacking. I apologize. I'm just expressing my frustration.
I'm expressing some frustration, too, in case you can't tell, right? So, look, it's a frustrating situation. You're talking about declining numbers of resources, citizens who feel like they're being stretched thin. 141 unfunded mandates that have been placed on local government, an increasingly challenging fiscal situation as you're having to navigate everything. And the people who are responsible for those things aren't coming to forums like this to listen to the frustrations, and instead it's just all of us who are frustrated about the frustrations. And so, yeah, it's definitely frustrating. In terms of like what we can actually do, I think the best thing that we can do is share stories like this one and hope that it resonates and that, this will somehow, move our Republican colleagues. But, like hope is a discipline and hope is a practice.
Yes.
But in terms of like a political strategy, I think part of what you need to be doing is figuring out in Fairfax and other parts of rural.
Fairfax isn't as bad, to be fair. I'm pretty blessed to be in Fairfax. But
There's good growth.
That's why I wanted to generalize the statements, because I'm pretty blessed to be where I'm at.
The fundamental point is, in the small towns and rural communities across the state that have the boot of the Republican legislature on their neck, need to figure out who they're voting for.
One thing I would really like to mention is I think it's vitally important that whether it's at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, when grant programs or assistance programs are being designed, anyone who might be impacted or applicable for that program needs to be included in the conversation of how it's administered, right? So if you have a new grant program under IEDA, under the Economic Development Authority, and they only talk to the 5 biggest counties, then the application program is going to work for the 5 biggest counties. So that's just one idea that is really important to me.
Well, I would take it back to Brady Shutt's question earlier on: is how do you get your message through? How do you impact what's going on in the Iowa legislature? When they started looking at the previous iteration of property tax reform 2 years ago, they had subcommittees. The subcommittees were packed. They had people from towns like yours there explaining why they were concerned about that particular draft and what it would do to their ability to raise the funds they needed so that they could actually serve the people they are either hired to or elected to serve. And we had people from Lee County who were Republican supervisors talking about the need to be able to fund their emergency medical folks because a medical facility had closed there. So we didn't come into office to raise taxes, but we have to have the money to provide this service to the people of Lee County. When I talked to the Eastern Iowa supervisors, I said, you need to bring your stories to whatever the conversation turns out to be in Des Moines, and talk to, in addition to the subcommittees, you need to go up and talk to all the representatives and all the senators. You can put in slips and ask them to come out. A lot of them will, a few of them won't, and tell your story. But mostly, I have no idea what proposed property tax reform might look like this year, but we need you and everyone else, whether elected or salaried, to come up and say, here is how this is already impacting our community. Here is how, and this is why you either should or shouldn't do this. It's really, really important.
Well, thank you again for having me.
We thought about running for office?
Thank you so much for having this. My name is Lori Woods. Thank you to Jessica Roman. I wouldn't even know this forum exists if it wasn't for her. I am a parent of a student in the school district. I have a 3rd grader. She attends Van Allen. Last year she was in a class of 19. This year she's in a class of 31. It's quite a difference. I'm here as a parent, but I also will disclose, to be transparent, that I'm a parent in the school district. So I'm a boots-on-the-ground person to see how this has affected these kids and these teachers. I reached out to the Iowa Department of Education. They said, did you meet with your school board? Yes. Did you meet with Matt Digner? Yes. Did you get a petition with 500 signatures? No. So I've been sent on a bit of a fool's errand, because our school board knows, Matt Digner knows, these are all reasonable people, but I am doing the petition painfully and slowly. But it's also sparked a sweet thing of a grassroots thing where a salon says, we have 5 at our salon, pick them up. A daycare says, we have 6 at our salon, pick them up. So it is, getting traction. So I don't know if there's really a question, but just be aware that we don't think that 32 is an acceptable number of kids in a room from a movement standpoint, from the transition time that's getting wasted. Oh, and I'll stop. Thank you.
So I can tell you that last year, when my granddaughter was who lives with me, was in kindergarten at Lemmy, she had 17 or 18 in her class, and this year she has 27. And I watched the teacher struggle, particularly at the beginning of the school year. I think as this is first trying to deal with 27 first graders. God bless the teachers who are doing this and have been doing it for years. But it's not. This is a direct result. If we go back to funding decisions, this is a direct result of funding decisions that are being made and are impacting our kids every day. And thank you for raising it.
Yeah, I'll just say we don't think it's acceptable either. And I graduated high school in 2017, right before the Republican, right at the start of the Republican trifecta in the state of Iowa, and we have seen every year what kind of impact their negligence towards our public schools have. And I think sometimes we get caught up in talking about school supplemental aid and 1% versus 2% and things like that. But when those percentages are lacking year after year after year after year, to Dave's point about math class, it compounds. And so you get to the point where you have 30 kids in an elementary school class, and we don't think that's acceptable either.
I'll also say, as somebody when teaching 8th grade, in the same year I had a class of 14 and a class of 32. Physical bodies make a difference. Fitting 14 desks in a room is very different from fitting 32 desks in a room when you're trying to keep kids engaged, when you're trying to give them the opportunity to get up and move around maybe at some point during the day.
Well, I remember visiting my daughters at Coralville Central, and when the classes went up in size a number of years ago, all I can remember is I just couldn't wait to get the heck out of there, going, wow, how can you do this? So thank you for helping with that. I'm sorry, I'm unclear what the petition does. Please use the mic so they catch it real quick, and then we'll get her in, just because we want to get our others.
It would not have been my choice, by the way. But from the Iowa Department of Education, they said the next step to do, just in the democratic process, not anyone's preference, is to get 500 signatures from Iowa City voters. And the petition says for pre-K and K, 20 and under, first grade and up, capped at 25 or under. That's all it says. It's very non-threatening petition. Just that's it.
Oh, thank you, Lori.
We'll have time for Kathy.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Wandrow. I'm a member of the League, and I'm also the chair of the Advocacy Committee. So I want to, again, thank you all for being here today. Education is a big topic for us in the League, and I'm grateful for your time. I'm starting to gain a whole new appreciation of what your lives are like, trying to track bills and keep track of forums. I would like to note that Representative Hora and Senator Driscoll are conducting a legislative briefing on February 20th. Any of you are invited to join me in Washington. We are attending. You're invited to join me if you weren't invited. So we weren't. We're happy to go visit them. It'll be a little bit more effort, but it's a way for them to hear us and for us to hear what they're saying. So again, thank you for being here this morning. Johnson County is very fortunate to have some of the top-rated private and public schools in Iowa, and we're grateful that you are championing that cause and protecting it. So one of the goals of the Advocacy Committee is to educate and activate, and last fall, before the session began, we came up with the Advocacy Report, a weekly email document that would track three things. One, what you were saying on record, and this is a great opportunity for you to spin that narrative, to put out there what you're proudest of, to tell us what you're working on, to put a red flag out there if you need our help. For example, I'd like to thank Representative Zabner for putting out there that he is co-sponsoring a bill to support feeding kids in Iowa over the summer after Governor Reynolds again turned down federal money to support that. So thank you for doing that. We're going to track that and keep on it. So any time that you would like to control what we have out there about you, I would love to get that information. The advocacy report comes out every Monday, so weekends are good. The second thing we are doing is trying to track legislation and bills. Senator Walz, thank you for the offer. I was talking to Senator Weiner before the session began about how to do that, and it is overwhelming. The only thing that would be crazier is to try to be in your position and keep track of all the meetings and where you have to be and how that happens. I am in awe. And the third thing is to forecast conferences and collaborative meetings of other groups that are aligned with our values. So if you are interested in becoming a subscriber to the advocacy report, please take a look at the voter, the website for the League of Women Voters Johnson County. There will be some information about how you can sign up for that email, and if you'd like to contribute some ideas to that as well. So again, thank you. If you want to join. Yes, absolutely. And that's the best way to start. So the voter will be coming out again in late February, correct, Paula? And there will be some information about how you can sign up for that. So again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks to all of you and those with questions and those with responses for the informative session. And thanks to all who are watching the live stream on Facebook. We will conclude this forum with closing remarks from each of our legislators. You will have 3 minutes for your remarks. We'll begin with Senator Walz.
Well, again, I'll just close by saying thank you to everybody for taking time out of your Saturday morning to be here. Kathy, look forward to following up and see if we can't get some kind of tutorial put together for folks interested in learning how to use the legislative website. I think that would be really helpful in terms of just staying on top of what's happening. I maybe close by just kind of echoing what Representative Zabner mentioned in his opening remarks. Obviously, the next 4 years are going to be a very trying and difficult time for our country and certainly for our state and our communities here. We've already seen this week the Trump administration put forward several executive orders that are having negative effects right here in our community, whether it's a hiring freeze that could negatively affect the Iowa City Veterans Affairs Hospital, a pause on NIH funding of research. There's 9 figures worth of research that gets done at the University of Iowa. Or even the fact that the Trump administration has now paused communication among several of the leading public health agencies, even as we're dealing with H5N1 spreading throughout livestock populations across the country and in some cases of animal to human transmission. There's a lot of really concerning things for all of us to be thinking about. But civic organizations and associations like the League of Women Voters play a really crucial role in our civic society of continuing to engage citizens and make sure that we have an informed populace. I don't know what the next 4 years are going to be like. Obviously, during the election, there was a lot of concern expressed for our democracy and a lot of the more authoritarian tendencies that President Trump has expressed and promulgated. And I agree with Representative Zabner that the confirmation of Pete Hegseth as our Secretary of Defense is a deeply troubling sign of the direction that this administration is headed. When General Jim Mattis was confirmed as the Secretary of Defense 8 years ago, the vote was 99-1. Even though there were concerns about having someone who had been engaged in active military duty serving in a civilian capacity, there was no doubt. I mean, General Mattis had unimpeachable credentials as an officer who had served our country with distinction and uniform. And to go from somebody who demonstrated that level of competence for the president now to be picking Pete Hegseth solely because of his blind loyalty to President Trump, rather than a devotion to the country or competency for the office, is a deeply troubling sign about the direction that we're headed. And so, we don't necessarily have all the answers in terms of what the next 4 years will be like here in our community, at the state level or at the national level. But I will say that I think all of us share a commitment to being engaged with you, to representing your views, your voices, your values, and to doing our best to serve you in Des Moines. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to serve the people of District 43. It's the honor and privilege of a lifetime, and I really appreciate the trust that you all have placed in me as your state senator. So thank you.
Senator Weiner.
Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for your really excellent and thought-provoking questions. I would echo much of what Senator Wall said. Sometimes the price of eggs has almost become a joke now, but it's real. Iowa is the #1 egg producer in the country, and when at the federal level you cut off scientific information so that people cannot know what the update was going to be on highly pathogenic bird flu so that we can start to get this under control, I can't say what the future is going to bring. When they cut off the NIH and the scientific community from doing the types of committee meetings that they normally would, from clinical trials. The University of Iowa is a top-tier research institution, and last year had something on the order of $683 million in grant funds. That matters to this community. I urge everyone, if you are at all involved in any of those issues, to contact your member of Congress, to contact your senators, because they have a vested interest in having this state and this district continue to function for a whole variety of reasons. Even if they don't love Johnson County, we need the university, we need UIHC, we need healthcare, we need research. When we are one of the #1 in cancers in this country, and one of the only ones that has a growing rate, we need cancer research. We don't need anything to be paused. So I don't know where any of it's going to go on a federal level. As I said at the beginning, I think some of the things will be emulated here. I watch out for what our colleagues may decide to do with respect, for example, to the Iowa Civil Rights Code and gender in the Iowa Civil Rights Code. But we will be here to talk to you. We will be pushing back to the extent that we can and making our voices heard. And we appreciate your voices and you being here and you sharing the word with others. So please continue to be in touch and continue to come to these forums. Thank you very much.
Representative Jacoby.
Thank you again for the forum. It is so good to be home. But I will be going back tomorrow, and it'll be a very busy week. I will continue to work to close down some of these unscrupulous puppy mills. We say we're #2 in the nation in cancer. Incidence of cancer, we're actually #1. The governor's numbers aren't totally accurate. But when it comes to puppy mills, I'm happy that the Jacoby family puts our values where our mouth is, because we just picked up 2 more dogs. So it's interesting that after our 2 passed away over the last 3 months, and my wife and I talked about, we'll have time to travel because we don't have dogs. Nope, we get a dog. Then we decide that dog needs a dog, so we get another dog. So we have a golden and a little yappy Yorkie thing. But actually, he's pretty good. But if you're coming to Des Moines, please let us know as far ahead of time as you can. If you send us a text or an email.
It's coming February 12th also.
February 12th, that's where I've actually got that down, probably right there. But if you're coming to visit, please let us know, because we want to make sure we set aside time to sit with you, show you around, and maybe even bring you into the chambers in the House side where you can sit and go, is that the person who didn't show up at the forum? But thank you again for your time and for your attendance today.
Representative Levin.
Thank you. Coming into my 3rd year in the legislature, I do feel a sense that I was able to hit the ground running. There are opportunities that abound in order to work on not only education issues that are such a passion of mine, but also some of these places where over the past 2 years I've found common ground with some of my colleagues. I'm in conversations with folks about anti-SLAPP legislation, so ensuring that nuisance lawsuits that are found to be completely unnecessary do not end up bankrupting small businesses or individuals just due to legal fees. Talking with folks about making sure that Iowa is a welcoming state for military families as they come back, making sure that students are able to register for classes on a schedule with the district, not dependent upon them being, when those military kids get back here, let's say after registration dates have closed, well, they don't have the opportunity in Iowa to register before they're physically here. And so just some of those little opportunities to work on priorities, in addition to bringing the values of District 89 to the floor, loud and proud, and saying, this is how we treat people. We consider compassion, we care about each other, and we want Iowans to feel safe, welcome, and see a future for themselves here in Iowa. So thank you all so much for staying engaged. Looking forward to hearing from you and seeing some of you as you get up to the Capitol.
Representative Nielsen.
I was going to preemptively give you my name, so whoops. I would just like to thank you all again and to the League for hosting us. And I really want to thank the League for making the effort to have one of these outside of downtown Iowa City. I think it's really important that we get out. This is the Johnson County League of Voters, and I think it's really important that we get into all kinds of different areas of Johnson County. So thank you very much for taking that request and giving it due consideration. We haven't had a lot happen, so in the first 2 weeks. I wish we had more answers for you. What can we do to make an impact on things? How do we change the narrative? Do we support child care, early child care? And I think the answer is we just don't know. We don't know what's going to come down next, and we don't know what the conversations are. And unfortunately, all we know is kind of what was given on the first day speeches. So a lot of bravado, a lot of arrogance, a lot of audacity. And if they do even half of what they promised in those first 2 day speeches, I mean, it's going to be pretty bad for the state of Iowa. And I know that we have to consider what's happening at the federal level over the next 4 years. That is also very scary because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think that if we choose to focus on Iowans and what's happening here and what we can have input on, we'll all feel a lot better about things and what's going on. I know that I'm going to be focusing on, the price of eggs, which was a promise that we heard that definitely did not get kept. I want to make sure that Iowans are have the money in their pocketbooks that they need to have a good life like the promise of Iowa says. So just thank you all for being here. Know that we're working really hard. We do get an opportunity to make some differences. They're usually kind of small, but we do make some differences. And a lot of that is because we come here and we listen to you. So thank you very much.
Representative Dabner.
Thank you so much to everyone for being here. I wanted to finish with 2 updates on projects that I've been talking about with the League over the last year that I have exciting updates on. The first one is on the last day of session, second to last day of session last year, the Senate finally passed my Accessible Parks bill to help make our state parks more accessible for people with disabilities and help folks with disabilities find those accessible opportunities. My colleague Sammy Sheets from Cedar Rapids, who serves as the lead Democrat on the Agriculture and Department of Natural Resources budget, was able to find $1.3 million in the budget and allocate that to making these upgrades. This week, I met with the Department of Natural Resources. In mid-February, they're going to be rolling out a new website that has a dedicated page so that folks with disabilities can find accessible opportunities in our state parks. And they've also allocated that $1.3 million to be spent by Memorial Day to improve opportunities in our state parks. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm excited to see what it means for people to access these parks. The second thing, this was a project the League was very involved in, and I think it was successful really because of your support. About a year ago, it was reported that the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services was failing to offer Medicaid recipients their right to register to vote when they sign up for Medicaid, which is required under federal law through the National Voter Registration Act. In the 27-page application, rather than including a form to register to vote, the department had included a link that was printed out on, I think, page 17. So, someone would actually have to type into their computer https://, and we know that, many folks on Medicaid don't have easy access to printers. This does not comply with federal law, which I made very clear to the Reynolds administration, but it took months and months of fighting with them and your pressure. A lot of people in this room wrote op-eds, contacted the department. We may have gotten into some screaming matches, to your point earlier, Representative Levin, but I'm really excited to share that in August, the department finally changed their policies to comply with federal law. And what we've seen in the first 4 months of that new updated form is that over 8 times more Iowans are able to register to vote through this system. And so there's a lot we can do by being engaged, and it's so incredibly wonderful to have partners like this group that can help us take on these fights and make sure that we can win and hold the Reynolds administration accountable when we have to.
Thank you all. We're so lucky to have you. Thanks to our local television staff for recording this event and live streaming it on the League page. Rebroadcast of the forum will run on the Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV. See their respective websites for programming. Our second legislative forum will take place on February 22nd from 9:30 to 11:30. The focus will be on the environment and water quality. Please join us. Thank you.